NRATV with Bill Whittle.
Hi, everybody. Live from Los Angeles. It's the Hot Mike Show. Hot Mike, unfortunately, was injured today. He was doing a photo shoot on Harley Davidson and managed to fall off and suffer extreme contusions and some road rash, which is unusual because the motorcycle wasn't moving at all. It was completely stationary. In any event, we expect to have him back tomorrow. Today, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the nature of the people in Hollywood who have so much more weight than they do depth. Let's just put it that way. It seems like one of the great curses of the modern age is this idea, really probably for the last 20 years ago or so, that celebrities some celebrities anyway, feel like they have to weigh in on everything. This is bad for two reasons. The little bad is because it just plain hurts my feelings. And not because of what they say. That doesn't hurt my feelings. Bothers me when people who I have seen and I've enjoyed enormously in movies, people I've been huge fans of, open their mouth about something they really don't know anything about. And then I realize, well, I guess I could never really go to another one of those person's movies again or something. It's just heartbreaking, really, to hear it and see it so often. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this today was because I wanted to talk a little bit about how shallow all of this is, how phony it all is, how really so much of the celebrity opinion is exactly like a Hollywood set. It's just a canvas flat with windows and doors painted on it, and behind it, there's really not much of anything. So what got me started on this today was again, another person I admire enormously as an artist, and that's Stephen King. He's just a tremendous writer, absolutely tremendous writer. But he tweeted something earlier today about Donald Trump. I think he said the news is real, but it's the president that's fake. I think that's there's Stephen King's tweet. The news is real, the president is fake. I'd start off by saying that, Stephen, for a guy who writes as much as you do, apparently you're not leaving yourself a lot of time for reading, because if you were, you'd know by now that CNN and the rest of the crowd know that the news is fake. James O'Keefe showed them on camera admitting that they know the news is fake, and they run it anyway. So why would you write something like that? Surely you know this. And I think the answer in the case of Stephen King comes a little bit deeper into some of his comments about Donald Trump. Because when he was asked about Donald Trump and why Donald Trump was elected, Stephen King said, well, there must be a lot of people out there, that'd be you and me, by the way, who really are scared about seeing people with different colors coming into the country, different shades of people. And people like you and me want the white man to stay on top, you see. And that's why we're so deep into Donald Trump, because he appeals to our fundamental fears and our fundamental prejudice. And hold on now, I hope you're ready for this. Are you sitting down? Apparently, it also appeals to our fundamental racism. Now, this is a really, really pathetic statement coming from a guy like Stephen King, who has to be a pretty bright guy. So why does he make statements like this? I don't doubt that he believes it, but why? That's kind of what we want to talk about today. So what kind of people really are we dealing with in Hollywood? Before we get to the kind of people we're talking about, I really can't start this discussion without saying this and saying it very clearly. There are large numbers of celebrities who are, in fact, terrifically generous people. And that doesn't just mean they're conservative people. They're just good people. A lot of celebrities have the good sense to be quiet because they understand that half of the people that come to pay money to watch them may not agree with their personal political views, and so they don't air them. I find that to be rather good policy, frankly, if you're a public asset like that. But among the people who really, I think, deserve a shout out, I'm just going to give a quick three, and they're just the first three that came to my mind. Denzel Washington, many years ago, I want to say back in 2004, when the Iraq War was just getting started, did a tour of a facility for injured soldiers. The story has it that he simply got out his checkbook and wrote a check for one of these new housing facilities, but he didn't. He made a donation. There's my friend Gary Sinise. Gary Sinise goes to Iraq, Afghanistan. He's been overseas, 15, 20 times with the Lieutenant Dan Band. He does free concerts, not just for people in Afghanistan and Iraq, also in Kansas and places like that. And Keanu Reeves, who I don't know much about politically, Keanu Reeves is a really interesting guy because Keanu Reeves took a fair amount of the tens of millions of dollars that he took from The Matrix, that he was paid for the Matrix trilogies. I mean, millions and millions of dollars, and basically gave it to the 3D artists who made those 3 movies. He basically went down and realized those people are not super well paid. And he took a huge percentage of his money and gave it to the 3D artists, saying to them, you're the guys that made me look so good in these movies. I just stood in front of a green screen. So I don't want to start this screed without clearly recognizing that there are, in fact, some terrific people in Hollywood. In fact, many of them are terrific. And some of them are not so terrific. So let's talk about that. I think if you look at Hollywood celebrities, the kind that just feel compelled to have to say something about everything all the time, I think you can break it down into certain groups. I think many of them are hypocrites. I think many of them are opportunists. Many of them are narcissists. And some of them are just plain nuts. So just as a kind of around the bases kind of a look at the kind of people that we seem to be facing in this culture war that we try to be a little part of here on the Hot Mike Show, let's start out with the hypocrites. Michael Moore is, in my mind, one of the great hypocrites of all time. Michael Moore rails against capitalism. He rails against capitalism all the time. He dresses as if he just walked off of a, out of the union office in Flint, Michigan. But his entire spiel is about capitalism, how evil it is, how we need socialized medicine and sicko, and so on and so on and so on. Well, many of you may not know that Michael Moore's film Fahrenheit 9/11 was going to be canceled. The studio wouldn't air it. And his friend Bob Weinstein, formerly of Miramax, insisted that they run this. So Bob Weinstein did Michael Moore a big favor, and Fahrenheit 9/11 did big business. And then this anti-capitalist, Michael Moore, who hates money, hates the power of so much money, sued Miramax and Harvey Weinstein because he didn't think they were paying him enough of the shares of the revenue of this movie of his, this anti-capitalist. So this anti-capitalist, who's worth $20 million, sues somebody who went out on a limb in order to make his movie possible because he didn't think he was getting enough of the cut of the tens of millions of dollars that were coming in. I don't know what you call it. I call it just almost unimaginable hypocrisy. I'll tell you who else is a hypocrite too, and that's Jamie Foxx. Jamie Foxx, during the right after Sandy Hook, was in a video calling for gun controls, strict gun controls, right after Sandy Hook, and he was sitting there looking very sad and apologetic and weepy and all the rest of it. When in point of fact, despite this particular clip, Jamie Foxx, at the time of this anti-gun video, when it came out, Jamie Foxx was in Django Unchained, blowing people away, just blood everywhere, just randomly gunning down people in glorious slow motion. Jamie Foxx has shot more people on camera than gets shot in this country in a year, probably. And for a guy who's made his entire living being a tough guy with a gun, I find it a little ironic, a little hypocritical for somebody like Jamie Foxx to say, I think we have too much gun glorification in this country. Oh, really? Really? Well, if that's the case, Jamie, then why don't you and the rest of you guys who appear in these videos make a pledge to the American people? Make a promise right now and say you're never going to have a gun in your hand in the movies ever again, and you will not appear in a movie where somebody's holding a gun in your hand, because that would be consistency and that wouldn't be hypocrisy. And then finally, in terms of the hypocrites, let's trot out our friend Matt Damon here, who also has a lot to say about guns and so on. But Matt Damon is one of these people who likes to this is what I want to get into today. He's a man of the people, you see. He's not just a guy who gets paid $20 million for making faces for 2 months. He's a man of the people. He's deeply concerned about the little people. Here's a little bit of an interview that he did back, I want to say in 2011 or so, when President Obama was saying, geez, we've got this terrible budget deficit. Do we need to raise taxes on the rich? That was the question he was asked right here.
Do you agree that the wealthy should pay more?
Yes. Yes, the wealthy are paying less than they've paid, at any time else. I mean, certainly in my lifetime. I mean, and probably, in the last century. I don't know what they were paying in the in the 20s. I don't know what we were paying like in the Roaring 20s. But it's criminal that so little is asked of people who are getting so much. I mean, I don't mind paying more. I really don't mind paying more taxes.
First of all, I hadn't noticed this the first time I saw the clip, but did you hear him? I don't know if they were paying back in the 20s. In other words, in the robber baron period. There is only one part of history. There's slavery and the robber barons, those evil capitalists that stole all the money from everybody. There's a lot to say about this. I suppose it doesn't really get on his radar that 1%, the top 1% of the population pays something like 40% of the total income taxes, and the top 5% pay 65% of the total income taxes. Put that aside. What's interesting about what Matt Damon said there was this: I'm a rich person. I think we should pay more taxes. I certainly don't mind paying more taxes. Well, there are two problems with this, Matt. The first problem is, if you make $20 million for a movie and you go home with, let's say, $13 million, and then you say you don't mind going home with $10 million and I'm ready to make a sacrifice, that's kind of you. But there are a lot of people out there who simply are going to miss college educations, or they're going to not be able to build an extension on their house, and not going to be able to put their kids through college because of the tax raise on the so-called wealthy, and so on. But the main reason why this thing with Matt is so bloody hypocritical is, as I've said before, when somebody writes Matt Damon a check, if Paramount writes Matt Damon a check for $20 million for a movie, they don't write pay to the order of Matt Damon $20 million. They write a check to MD Enterprises Incorporated, which then buys Matt's house and buys Matt's car, buys Matt's travel, buys Matt's everything, pays him some pocket money, and all of this money is basically put into a corporation, production company, and LLC, so he's not paying much income at all. You see how it works? I get to sound like I'm a very, very noble person, very, very deep and virtuous person, a very smart person too. But in reality, it's all a bunch of lies. So there are your hypocrites. Opportunists, we can count, let's see, George Lopez, who just, what was it, yesterday, 2 days ago, said, hey, if we want to make the streets safer, President Trump, instead of deporting illegals, why don't we deport the police? Why would you say something like that, George? Why would you say we should make the country safer by deporting the police? I think it's because you have a new special coming up, George. I think it's because you got a new Hollywood special coming up on HBO. I think it's because your career is not what it used to be and never really was all that much, to be honest with you. I think you're looking for street cred. And I think, as we discussed yesterday, by saying something like that, what you're basically doing, George, is you are creating a world where law enforcement is treated as if they're criminals, and you're making that job not only more difficult for policemen, but much more dangerous. I think another opportunist we could point to is the poor dear Kathy Griffin, the poor victim. Kathy Griffin, who you may recall not too long ago, went to a fair amount of trouble with a recent, got a big shoot and a big crew and a big set, makeup, all that other stuff, and she holds up a picture, not a picture, she holds up Donald Trump's severed head, and she thinks it's edgy and funny. And when the country comes back at her and says, how dare you, this is appalling, this is pornographic, Kathy Griffin wants to make it all about how she's the victim, how Donald Trump broke her. Well, I suspect, Kathy, that the reason you held up that severed head of Donald Trump was because you were looking for something edgy and looking for a little publicity. And when people reminded you of how appalling and how disgusting it was, you had just a complete meltdown in which you blamed Donald Trump for the thing that you started. And I find that just to be opportunist. I think it's just a publicity stunt. And finally, of course, with the opportunists, let's not forget Madonna, who said, I can't, at a rally right after Trump's election inauguration, right around then, she was out there saying, in front of a group of large number of people, saying, I often dream about going and blowing up the White House. Okay. You were a tremendous artist, Madonna. I mean, really, you were a tremendous artist, tremendous music 20, 25 years ago, 30 years ago. You're not exactly the kind of person I would particularly credit with either deep political insight. I don't credit you with a profound sense of morality or decency. I think you're kind of a desperate person who is really, really trying hard to look as young and as hip as possible. And I don't believe a word you say either. So anyway, and finally, our final category is just plain nuts. Johnny Depp says it's been a while since an actor attempted to assassinate a president. Maybe it's time to try that again. Johnny Depp is one of the greatest actors who ever lived. I don't want to be misunderstood about this. He's incredibly brilliant. But if you look at the characters he plays, you never see Johnny Depp there. Johnny Depp is just barking mad. He's just plain nuts. He's a good kind of nuts in terms of being a great actor, but this is not the face of somebody that I think we have to take very seriously. So anyway, all of this just to say that the people who live out here in Hollywood are not like you and me. They're not like the folks back home. As a matter of fact, the thing they have most in common is how much they hate the folks back home. And in order to talk about that aspect of it, I'd like to bring in one of the very few conservative comedians that I know out there. His name's Tim Young. We tried to get him on Skype. It looks like we're having a little bit of a problem with this Skype conversation, so he's joining us by phone. You can find him on timyoung.com. Tim, are you out there? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I guess we have budget cuts on the internet tonight. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great, buddy. I'm doing fine, thanks. Tim, you're a conservative in this business, and you do a lot of political commentary and a lot of commentary on the pop culture and this sort of thing. As a conservative, you're not in this echo chamber. These people aren't quite right, are they? I mean, there's something not quite right about pretty much all of them.
Well, I don't see them as much different than a lot of people who just go to protests and blindly hold up whatever sign they're handed, or, like women who went to the Women's March and put on hijabs that they were just handed and don't know, understand, like, the suppression of certain aspects of that religion. So, like, there's just a lot of just, I think we forget how stupid actors are. I think that's really what the bottom line is.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, pretty much. I've sort of, I don't know if this is actually a true story, but certainly the image of the actor is somebody who is sitting someplace trying to look inconspicuous in a very conspicuous place, and they're reading War and Peace, and they've got on glasses, and the glasses don't have a prescription in them, right? I mean, that's basically what it is. They're people who are fundamentally very good at playing people that they're not, and I think, Tim, on some level, they get very insecure about the fact that while they're very good at making other people say things through script and dialogue and acting, I think they get very insecure about the fact that they feel like they have nothing to say, so they want to say something, and it's not very impressive.
Well, it's a big groupthink thing. I mean, like, they're kind of like lemmings out there, man, and then they don't want their money to dry up either. So there are a couple of different aspects that really go into this. So number one, they're dumb. Number two, they want to be rich. And number three, they want to fit in. And so when you're in that bubble and everyone else and your bosses are all saying, hey, you have to say X, Y, Z, they're going to say X, Y, Z regardless and go along with whatever the flow is, with all of those factors, working in.
So when you say that they want to fit in, I think I completely agree with you on this. It's in the nature of somebody who becomes an actor to be somebody who wants approval and definitely kind of needs approval. So when you say they say the same things because they want to fit in, do you think it's basically a fig leaf for them? In the case of the celebrities we're talking about, these are multi-millionaires. But all of their friends, the rich ones and the poor ones, are Bernie supporters, and they know that money's very bad, and they know that success is just terrible, and they know that any money they've taken as multimillionaires has to have come from somebody's college education or some poor woman not able to feed her children because of the money they've taken. So it's kind of a fig leaf for them, isn't it, to take this social justice position and how they're down with the struggle as they look, out on the poverty of the world from their Bel Air mansions.
Yeah, and absolutely. And you have to remember, too, I mean, like, it's one thing if they were to develop their political opinions now, because, any businessman now, for the most part, a lot of businesses and CEOs have started to lean right or lean right because of the policies that benefit them. But a lot of their policy decisions and where they stand began when they were younger and when they really did actually have to fit in order to make it and go along with whatever they were saying. But now, yeah, it is. These people live in a bubble, just like, I live in Washington, D.C., there's a bubble here. People don't understand how the real world works and what things actually cost and how, people still can barely afford to put food on their tables. And they deal with other stupid issues out here rather than actual American issues and things that are affecting everyday people. So it's a lot of that, like, just being clueless and dumb and then, like playing along. There's so many things that go into being an actor nowadays.
And it's kind of ironic, isn't it, Tim, that so many of them will come out, so many actors, celebrities will speak about income inequality, and yet I don't think there is a greater instance of income inequality than there is on a movie set. The difference between Matt Damon making $20 million and the person behind him, who's also an actor, we call them extras or background, that person might make $75 or $100 a day. So they're going to need a pretty big fig leaf to cover up a fair amount of this hypocrisy, I suspect.
Oh, sorry, yeah. And I mean, in this last instance, with the fake news about, sorry, I choked there, with Wonder Woman,
I could tell.
They said that she wasn't making, I just fell apart right there.
That's okay.
Wonder Woman
happens to me all the time.
Sorry. They said Wonder Woman only made $300,000 for the Wonder Woman movie, which was fake news. She made a few million. There was a back-end deal with that. But, like, they've been trying to create narratives to make themselves seem more like victims, like everyday people and what their narrative is with everyday people. they go back and forth, and to stick on like this women's issue and pay and equal rights and things like that in Hollywood. They said there weren't enough women leads, and then they had the Ghostbusters movie with women leads. But then America didn't accept that because, they were claiming that America hated that movie because it was women. And it's almost like if you pile it all up, the hypocrisy is so hard to keep up with. Because they can't even, while they're trying to cover themselves and they're trying to say, and check all the boxes in their belief system, the narratives overlap and they just look like fools.
Yeah, that's right. I guess Wonder Woman only made $300,000 because of the war on women, and if they admitted how much money she actually made and the fact that this is one of the few successful movies all summer, then that whole America's misogynist 72 cents on the dollar thing goes right out the window along with everything else. Tim, if you can hang on a second, we're going to go to a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about that echo chamber that exists not only here in Hollywood but in Washington as well. I'm Bill Whittle. This is the Hot Mic Show. We'll see you back in just a couple moments right here on NRATV.